Particular vlog, I want to discuss exactly what fitness equipment I use when performing all of my weight training sessions. I think it's going to help you a lot, because once you start training for a decent period of time, some of the pieces of equipment I'm going to discuss shortly can actually make some improvement. It's obviously not going to make as much of a difference compared to your nutrition and also your weight training program, but once you have that in place and you've been doing that for a period of time, these pieces of equipment can actually make a decent amount of difference, particularly for some of your lower body sessions. So I'll discuss probably the most important that I've recently invested in. Well, I say recently, it's probably within the last couple of years, a pair of squat shoes. You're probably wondering, James, what are you on about? Surely a pair of squat shoes is not going to make that much difference, but it actually does make quite a significant difference. One of the reasons why is if you're typically squatting in just traditional running shoes, one of the reasons why they're not ideal for squatting is because they contain air within the sole. They actually compress, which is obviously very good for running, but it's not particularly good for squats, or because you're just essentially losing power. Additionally, because you've got a flat sole, it does just make it a little bit more tricky to get to depth. Depth is really getting to just below parallel, so your quadricep will be just below parallel to the floor. Whereas with a proper squat shoe, I don't know if you can see here, actually has an elevated heel. So you can see this, and this is, I don't know if you can hear that, probably can't even hear it, but I thought I'd do that anyway. This has an elevated heel and it's actually solid, and that makes a huge difference because essentially you're just not losing any power as you would do with a traditional running shoe. So elevated heel, and also because it's absolutely solid, you're not losing any power, and this does make a huge difference. It just allows you to get to depth much more easily just because of that raised heel. So you may have done squats in the past where you have small plates underneath your heels, and that allows you to get deeper, but by using the squat shoe, it actually does that by default. So these are actually quite expensive. I think these cost me about £90. I think you can probably get them for about 70 now, but there are cheaper alternatives on the market for maybe 40, 50 pounds. But it does make a big difference, especially for your squats. So I certainly suggest looking at these, especially if you've been training for at least a couple of years. If you haven't got a couple of years weight training experience, it's probably not worth looking at, but once you've been training for a decent period of time, it does actually make quite a bit of difference to your squats in terms of depth, in terms of how it feels. Honestly, as soon as you start using these, it just feels completely different. I certainly wouldn't squat in anything else. I remember when the first person that recommended me these shoes, and I was like, surely it can't make that much difference, but when you actually try it, it actually does make a huge difference. As mentioned, you can get much cheaper, but I think these are the weightlifting 2.0s, and they've got quite a few colours, and this is actually a mid-range one. There's actually more expensive options on the market, but even if you've got the 40 or 50 pound one, if you've been training for a couple of years, it does actually make quite a big difference. The next thing is an actual weightlifting belt. So again, this does actually make quite a big difference for your squats and deadlifts. So by using this, you should be stronger literally by just using this belt for your squats and deadlifts. One of the biggest reasons is it increases what's called intra-abdominal pressure. So essentially when you're performing a squat or a deadlift, one of the things you want to be focusing on is pushing your stomach out and holding your abdominals in a fixed position. So I've mentioned this many times before. The best way I know to describe this is to imagine if someone's about to punch you in the stomach, what would your natural response be? And your natural response would be to essentially push your stomach out and hold your abdominals in a fixed position, trying to brace your abs and push your abdominals out, and you'd wait for someone to punch you in the stomach. But that's the feeling you want to have for every repetition of the squat and the deadlift. So before each repetition, you're having a big deep breath, you're then pushing your abdominals out, and then you're going to hold that position until you've completed a rep, and then you're going to breathe out and then breathe in again before performing the next repetition. But by having a belt, it allows you to push your abdominals up against the belt, and that feeling alone makes a big difference, because if you're just trying to brace your core without a belt, it's quite difficult to consciously do. But by having something to push up against, it makes a tremendous difference. So again, it increases intra-abdominal pressure and therefore allows you to move more weight for your squats and deadlifts. Similar to what I mentioned with the squat shoes, if you're new to deadlifting and squatting, I wouldn't suggest using a belt just yet. I'd focus on really refining your form and technique for a period of time. Once you've got maybe a year's training under your belt, certainly worth considering a belt just like this. So I actually got this from what's called the Strength Shop, I believe, but it's based on the Inza belt, which is a belt from the USA. I would have got that one, but the postage is just absolutely ridiculous for whatever reason. I think the postage was just as much as the belt, which in this day and age just seems crazy. So this is basically like a UK replica. I think it's about 50-60 pounds. Again, this is pretty thick. I don't know the exact millimeters for how thick the belt is, but you want to make sure you get a relatively decent one. Maybe you can get a cheap one where the belt's very thin and it's not the same width all the way around. You see the cheap ones which are kind of thicker at the back and they go thin around the front. You don't want that. You want the same width all the way around the belt. But certainly have a look at that. Next couple of items. Liquid chalk. This makes a tremendous difference, especially for your traditional deadlifts. This is much better than traditional chalk. Traditional chalk is very messy, but because this is a liquid substance, nowhere near as messy, but you're getting the same benefits of chalk. If you've ever done deadlifts before, you know that your grip strength can be the weakest link within the deadlifts. So by having some chalk, pretty much you'll be stronger by default just by having the chalk. This lasts for a long time as well, so certainly worth having a look at. You get, I think it's costing like a £5 online. Next is some straps. Very useful for your heavy dumbbell, barbell rowing movements, again where your grip strength can be the limiting factor. And again, this just makes a difference to how much weight you can lift overnight. Just by implementing this, you'll be stronger for things like barbell rows, dumbbell rows, etc. Additionally, I like to use these for my Romanian deadlifts where I'm not touching the weight on the floor. If I'm doing traditional deadlifts, I use the chalk. If I'm doing Romanian deadlifts where you're hanging onto the bar for the whole set because you're not touching the weight on the floor, I use the straps as well. So hopefully that's been useful. As mentioned, if you're just new to weight training, I wouldn't bother with any of these except maybe for the straps potentially. But if you've been training for 1 to 2 years, these things do make a difference, especially the squat shoes and the belt for your lower body lifts. You'll by default just be stronger by implementing both of these, and it just teaches you how to brace your core effectively with regards to the belt because you've got something to push up against. So hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully you can start applying some of these, as mentioned, if you've got 1 to 2 years training already. So thank you very much for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoyed it. If you're watching this on Facebook, like the video if you enjoyed it, and share the video with any of your friends who you think could benefit from this information. Thank you very much.